What's up, everybody? My name is Lesage Singing, and today we're going to be covering Jeff Buckley, specifically his live performance of Lover, You Should Have Come Over. And my dog and I will be breaking down why Jeff is one of, if not the greatest rock singer ever alive. And I'm looking at you, Freddie Mercury. Come on, haters. Have at thee. So what I find really interesting about this moment right here is that it shows you how excellent his guitar playing is. On one hand, he's using a Fender Telecaster with all sorts of really interesting effects like quad reverb and some delay. And on the other hand, he's showing that he actually used to be almost strictly a guitar player. That's right, Jeff Buckley originally had very little aspirations to sing. I love the way he hits that lower string there. One of the things that Jeff Buckley did really, really well was being able to harmonize a melody. Most guitar players see themselves as lead guitarists or rhythm guitarists. But really good musicians, and this is very prevalent in classical and jazz guitar, many of those musicians in those genres are able to take a melody and put harmony around that melody. And since Jeff has a lot of experience with jazz, he is able to make rhythm guitar interesting in the same way that a fingerstyle guitarist would do. And he does it while being musically very deliberate and very intelligent. And this is definitely better heard in the introduction to Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, Jeff Buckley's specific cover of that tune. Hallelujah. There's a way to make harmonies match a melody. It's just really difficult to do because you need to know how to move your harmony against what your melody is doing. He's a really sophisticated musician. One of the really interesting things about Jeff Buckley is not only his musicianship, but his lyricism. Let's break that down, because this song sets up an image real fast. Looking at the door, I see the rain. In the very first paragraph of these lyrics, he paints a scene, putting us into the shoes and the perspective of the jilted lover. Fall upon your funeral mourner. One of the really big difficulties in songwriting is saying a lot in a very short period of time. By setting up this scene, not only do we have a visual that we can put ourselves into, but we also have the sentiment and the headspace of where the singer is at in 4 lines right off the bat. Without having to make a fancy beat or a fancy guitar solo or a high note or anything like that, he brings us to a place with just the words. In a wake of sad relations as the shoes fill up with water. You're on my mind, so... Dynamics are an essential part of expressing oneself in music. And this applies for any instrument, but the human voice is particularly good at it. And when we look at this phrase that Jeff Buckley just did, we see that not only is he using something to pull back the volume on the high note, but he's using a little bit of tension. And the reason why is that he wants to get that little bit of silence by closing his mouth and tightening his jaw, but also to express strain. Listen to how I would sing it without the jaw tension. You're on my mind, so... That's the kind of thing we hear a lot from Radiohead and even in Lilac Wine. But in this particular instance, he puts a little bit of strain on it to give it a little bit more grit and emotion. You're on my mind, so... It's important for singers to really appreciate something like this from Jeff Buckley because, just like I showed, we can do it too. I mean, is it going to be as good as Jeff Buckley, or are we going to be as great as a singer like that? Probably not. But by learning these things, we can apply them and elevate our own singing. And this is the smartest thing you can do as a singer. Know what you can do better than other people, because there's something that you can do. This is what's cool about the human voice. Everything's built different. Everyone's built different. There's cool things you can do. And this is what he does often. You tonight. This is something you can do if you're learning. Aspirates are really, really great. Is an aspirate. What an aspirate does is it will do this, and then it'll force the folds to come together. And if you're changing notes, he's doing it for effect. He doesn't need any help vocally. But if you're doing like an exercise where you're just going out like an arpeggio or something, and you're going over a break, ha, ha, ha. What it'll do is it'll just get you to the point where your folds are just kind of barely touching. Do not do it forcibly, because then that's not going to work. Gentle aspirates, gentle H's are a wonderful tool to figure out difficult parts of your range, but they also sound good if you use them right. And it gives it a smoothness too, because he's using the effect that the aspirate does have, and it makes the phrase smooth. Look at his mouth position. And when I say position, I don't mean like assume the position. Don't ever think of singing like that. It's all a spectrum. So he's right here. Ooh. Jeff Buckley is just amazing at pacing. The way that he's been kind of holding back vocally intentionally so that he can really give life to the chorus is, well, genius. So he's been doing like too young to hold on, right? With that little bit of tight close right there, right? But it's still on pitch because it's done gently. And then he opens it up to break free and run. Sometimes a man gets carried away. Sometimes a man must waste no one. Jeff Buckley borrows a lot from different genres, in no small part because he did work with a lot of different genres, from reggae to jazz to you name it, he's probably done it. But one of the things that he doesn't get enough credit for is actually how he borrows from musical theater, specifically tension and release. Throughout the entirety of the Grace album, we get this tension release mixed with a lot of dynamics, like no one, no. That kind of a thing is just so Jeff Buckley, it's ridiculous. He does that everywhere. Really, really part of his sound, and it's one of the reasons I think he sounds so cool. And, well, why the music is so satisfying. It's because he's always making sure that the phrase is alive. He has no one. You should have come over. There are not a lot of rock musicians in 1994, when the Grace album came out, who were willing to add this level of vulnerability, whether it be Lover, You Should Have Come Over, Lilac Wine, or So Real, or Last Goodbye. All of these songs were able to introduce some sensitivity. And there's also one other thing about this particular performance, and Jeff Buckley live in general, that is pretty cool. I do want to point out, in most situations when you have a live performance like this, usually the singer is compressed to all holy hell. Like, it's ridiculous how much compression you'll find on almost any live performance. But for Jeff, the dynamic range in his music is really, really, really important. And so credit to the drummer. Look at how careful the drummer is being with volume, because that's the hardest part when you're singing live and you got a dynamic mic right in front of you, is that drummer almost always bleeds into the mic, because drums are loud, way louder than the human voice. Even if I'm an opera singer, I can't really outdo a drum kit. Unless I was like a massive, massive singer. I've heard those, where it's like being right next to a Rocks concert speaker. But, most people don't have that size, and certainly Jeff didn't. And so this drummer has to be so careful, and you can see him being masterfully careful. It's really great. You should have come. See? So of course, first and foremost, the drummer needs to get credit for that. But there's also credit due to Jeff Buckley, who understood the need for a certain kind of drummer in order for him to be successful with his music performing live. This goes back to kind of how he would use more open vowels and like a little bit more of a traditional singing style. He's really intentional about restraining it, and then he'll let it go, and it's just like the payoff is tremendous. It's a contrast in tone too. O is a very round vowel. Oh, yeah. Oh, right. He'll do that very kind of classical. And then he'll do the jaw thing again. I can't go as high as he does, but from the right. And that kind of bite sound that he gets, like, it's just so him. I don't know really anyone who does this except for Tim Buckley, his dad. Like, he's just got so many little idioms that are just his, that like make the Jeff Buckley sound. And it's just so cool. And at no time is there nasality in his singing. And that's part of the reason it's so warm and intimate, is that he just doesn't put a lot of nasality into anything. And that when the mouth is closed and forward like that, it also rounds out the tone. Feel too young to hold on. That's really hard to manage. When you're not belting, and this is why I think, listen, if you're a singer, you should learn how to, later on down the road, you should learn to belt, and you should learn to how to not belt. It becomes a lot more difficult when you don't know how to belt to give these sort of rougher sounds. It's like hard mode. And he was really good at it. He just never really learned to belt. And this is different than belting. It's going up high and introducing tension so that it's straight tone and that you're not using a lot of vibrato. And it gives a little bit of a grit. But if you put too much air behind it, you're going to go flat and it's not going to sound good and it's not going to work. And so what he does here is expertly done in that he is using just the right amount of air. Like, well, like that, even that, just too much air goes flat and it sounds forced. But listen to the way he does it. It's really good. And that grind is from what are called the false folds, which are right above the real folds, the false folds coming together. And again, it's a really gritty sound, but it's precise from the singer's point of view. If your air is too much, it's just not going to work. We could go back to the huh exercise where we did huh, like if you do the aspirate to kind of get you there, and then you do the jaw thing that he does and put a little bit of tension in there. That's a good starting exercise to kind of get to that sound, but just be very careful and don't do it for too long straight in a row. It does take a lot of time to kind of get the hang of this. I just straight up don't know how to do that. Okay, so let's reinforce falsetto into falsetto. It's so hard. Reinforced falsetto is actually a little bit easier as you get higher and higher into the extremes of the tenor range. But what Jeff Buckley does that's so intricate and interesting is that he'll go from reinforced falsetto, which sounds like wow, right? Super loud, super robust. And then he'll go from that to so it's just straight up falsetto. To understand why this is so hard, we actually need to understand a little bit about how the vocal folds work when we go up high. So generally speaking, when we talk about falsetto, we're talking about the folds flipping up entirely with no connection. That gives us that flute-like sound that we just heard. But there's an entire range of motion here. There can be some connection, a lot of connection, etc., etc., etc. So the folds can be separate and connected at the same time. And like I said, this happens on a continuum. So Jeff Buckley is able to control from all this to get full, reinforced, Normal falsetto, he's got all of that range of motion on lock. I can't even begin to explain to you, as my chair almost falls backwards because I'm shocked. I can't even begin to explain to you, that is so hard. I've been singing my whole life. I've been trained for 14 years. I wanted to be a Shaolin monk. I trained for singing that hard. And the level of breath precision that requires, you need a very small inhale, you need a very relaxed torso. In many cases, you need to expand your torso, which he's doing right here. It's so difficult. And he makes it sound and look like it's not hard at all. Probably because for him it isn't. And that, to me, is a mark of a great singer. When they do things that are difficult for ordinary people, but they've worked on it and mastered it to the point where it's easy. If you want to be great at a thing, you have to make things easy. And that's the hardest part about being great at something. So I do a lot of deep dives on this channel. And if you want a specific artist, if you want me to react or do a deep dive on a specific artist, check out in the comment down there, I'll have it pinned, is my next upcoming live stream. Short of that, you can hit the bell notification so that you are notified when I go live. Until next time, happy singing. Or, happy listening.